have you pretend you're with me in Oxford. And this is what I would do in a classroom this size. So I want you to take out your cell phones. Everyone have their cell phones? Yeah? This is Argentina. Got cell phones. Everyone takes pictures. I want you to find one picture, and you cannot spend 10 minutes going through your 10,000 photos. One photo that represents you, that you want to introduce yourself to another person, the thing you love, the thing that you treasure. I want you to find that photo. One, you've got 30 seconds to find it. 30 seconds to find it. Find that photo that's symbolic of you. Yeah? Everyone find it? Got the photos? Yeah? Favorite photo? This is a test. I'm going to see the technological sophistication of Argentina, and I'm going to see what you care about. Yeah? So while we're doing that, everybody have their photos? Raise your hands. Fantastic. I see my students, actually. Flor, thank you for doing that. You've got your photos? All right. So you usually are going to sit next to someone you know. Perfect. Fantastic. I want you to find someone that you don't know in front of you, behind you, and introduce yourself to them. You may know everybody, but that's okay. Just introduce yourself to them. With your photo. With your photo. With your photo. Introduce yourself with the photo. All right, everybody got their photos? Everybody's chatting? I'm watching silent faces, stony faces. Okay? Okay, you got your photos? All right. This is a very quick exercise. Everyone has their photos. They've made their introductions, yeah? Okay, all good? Made your introductions? And this is Argentina, so we could talk forever. So we're going to stop, yeah? We're going to stop. And we've got the introductions. Now we're closing. We're going to pretend we're Japanese, and we're going to close down very quickly. All right, exercise over. Exercise over. I usually have a mallet that I clang, a bell that I clang. All right, everyone done introducing? Yes? I have this outfit. This is not my funeral outfit, but I want to explain this. I wear black and white because the world is not black and white. You know, it's multiple shades of gray and, more importantly, or orange or red, right? It's vibrant, it's exciting. So, how many of you have photos of your family? Raise your hand. How many showed photos of family? Familia. Yeah? All right. Most people, right? Those who didn't use photos of family, raise your hand. Okay. And what were those photos of? What were those photos of? For those who didn't have family, what were the photos of? Yes. I'm gonna call the two of you together. What were the photos of? Yeah? All right, so I have to have my translator.
Activities against drugs.
Fantastic, I love it. Okay, activism, yeah? Activism.
De la actividad que realizo en la actualidad, que es una coordinación en una fundación de salud mental. Coordinadora de un grupo de familia.
Fantastic. Anyone else at the back who didn't use, yes? A picture of friends and nature. Fantastic. Yes. Yes.
An international conference with colleagues in Belgium.
Fantastic. I'll be there soon, right? So I am from Oxford, and I never thought I would be there. My father was a coal miner. My mother was a bookkeeper. And their aspirations for me were not to go to university. So this is, again, how you move your passion. Each one of you is a leader. We're going to talk about leadership for impact. Every one of you is a leader because you impact people's lives in a profound way, right? A profound way. I'm going to show you my photos. I hope I'm going to show you my photos. My family, yeah? My son, who is an artist, who fell in love in Buenos Aires with his wife 7 years ago and married. So this is home to me and to them. They spend 6 months here and 6 months in the States. And the reason they go to the States, even though they want to be here, is because they can't afford to live here. Artists don't make any money. So that's the reality. So my son, there's some resemblance, and my daughter-in-law. So tomorrow I'm taking a bus tour with my daughter-in-law's mother to see Buenos Aires. So this is not my first trip, and it's joyful to be here. I was asked, why did you come to Buenos Aires? The weather, football, tango? No. I came because of Carolina. I also want to show you a place I love, which is, and I get to do two because I'm faculty, because I can stand up here and I can, right? It's my right. A place that I love, which you saw for just a moment. So this is my community. I work in 90 countries, and my community and family are people like Carolina. I can tell you about my journey with her from a global perspective and why I love her dearly and what she means to the world, not just to you, but selfishly to the world. So I think that this gives you a sense of where I work, and each one of those dots, oh, this is animated, represents my community. So I'll be in Nigeria, I'll be in Kenya. By the end of the year, I'll be in Mumbai, I'll be in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, I'll be back in Oxford. So there are multiple places, and yet you are united by what you care about, the passion of your family, the people that you love. My family this year, Juan Carlos from Santiago, amazing colleagues from Australia, the Netherlands, the United States, and Peru. So we have a variety of people that come from different places with one purpose. How do I use money to create positive social and environmental change? How do we do that in a way that will make a difference in a positive way to people's lives? When I met Carolina, so I can tell the secrets of these things, these stories, in the classroom, and she's come back to Oxford as guest faculty, focused on arts and creating a $500 million, they exercise our students, $500 million Creative Economies Fund to support artists around the world with a colleague from Nigeria. So that's the context. It's her energy, her undaunted love of what she does and the passion that she brings to change. And when we had this conversation about why is Gayle coming to Buenos Aires, do you want to come? It was because of her. She's my family. And like you, I choose to be with my family and celebrate her great success. And all of your great success, right? I think about the way that our family and the team that you've created are just magnificent, right? Absolutely. Treated me with great affection. And if I can share that affection in any way and help, I will. So that is Carolina in Patagonia, a project that we're scheming together, how to create an executive education program in Argentina and Chile and Brazil to actually begin to train executives around the world in the new ways of thinking. So we're going to talk about, there's no discussion, what keeps us awake. And I want to say these are the issues that keep executives awake around the world and keep me awake and keep you awake, right? So we begin with what are the challenges that our world faces that you as leaders are dealing with in Argentina and you as leaders are dealing with around the world. Misinformation, one of the biggest issues. And this comes out of the World Economic Forum, global risk analysis. And we use those risks as a way of how to move capital to address these issues. So misinformation in a world that is politically volatile, that is being shaped by inaccurate information. Involuntary migration. These are the issues again. Change the supply chain and industry, change our housing, our social needs, and our economic needs. Loss of biodiversity. 1 million species extinct by 2050. Change to Earth systems, cost of 5 trillion, unimaginable changes to our environment and to our natural world. Extreme weather. So last year alone in Argentina, each of your state had wildfires that were set by humans. 95% were set by humans. Natural disasters. Pollution. Poverty and inequality. Lack of access to water. These are the issues that drive us because of that essence of your family, the people you love in your family, in your community, and in the world. And what's needed to address those issues. The people who come to my class, Carolina and others, are all about what can we do. They're undaunted by these issues because they face us. And we must deal with them. And you as leaders in your own communities are offering solutions, yeah? Culture eats strategy for lunch. Carolina loves Peter Drucker, who is one of my favorite also mentors, just in terms of the value and importance that the culture of an organization that you bring influences the impact that you have on the communities you seek to serve, or within your own organization, or within the world. So how you create a culture that, based on your leadership values, is what I teach. How you bring leadership and money together to create the most powerful change, to address those complex issues that we all face. Now, Argentina has other layers that we can add on to that, but the reality is we all face these issues. So this concept of what kind of leadership skills do we need to address those issues and bring to the communities and to our families that we want to serve, right, that we want to protect. So this concept of courage, the ability to be fearless. Now, this is an exercise, so all of you must get up and do this exercise now. So courage means many things, but physically this really hurts. But yes, this is courage. It's courage to adapt to what you're given. Raise your hand if you're an NGO. NGOs. Be loud and proud. Stand up. The NGOs with whom I work, and my background is in organizing, it's in business, it's in law, it's in policy. I've lived way too many lives, but that is, and we're going to keep going. But the fact is, NGOs are the centerpiece of where change happens. There's $100 trillion available for responsible investing that has to move through a system of different organizations and entities and intermediaries to community. What we're finding globally is those NGOs that are on the ground are the navigators and translators for those up the chain in terms of where the money is. So building those relationships, when we talk about collaboration, building those relationships with colleagues who need your help to understand what's happening on the ground is becoming more and more important. And PwC Consultants had 250,000 people to address the issue of sustainability and have never worked on the ground. So NGOs can, in fact, begin to build those bridges. And that's what we're seeing in our school and in other business schools, right? So how we build community. How do you create transparency when government isn't transparent, when politics are raw? The ability to speak the truth is the essence of good leadership in an organization. I taught a master class here 10 days ago, yeah? Ask everyone this question, and I will ask it to you. How many of you work in organizations that embrace transparency and embrace the ability to say what doesn't work? How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you work for organizations that do that? That embrace, fantastic. Because there was no one when we had actually have a conversation, maybe they were fearful of me. when we were at the master class. That is the essence. You're going to learn and adapt when you're dealing with the world's most complex issues. You learn and adapt through honesty. You learn and adapt. All the family members, when our kids make mistakes, what do we say? Lessons to be learned. Move on. Or, they go to the corner or something. But anyway, I think this piece of how do we have the responsibility of being honest? Creativity, the ability to see different scenarios, to plan ahead, to imagine what's possible. The thing that with Carolina, when I met her, and Flor, who was also in my class, is this imaginative way of problem solving. To think and be creative. Often we find when we are really immersed in those issues, those are depressing issues that I showed you images of. How do we maintain our resilience and our ability to be creative? Out of the greatest crises, though, comes a new way of thinking. So how do we act our way into a new way of thinking? Not in a black and white scenario, right? In orange and vibrant purple. Capital. There is the money side, and there's the human side, and there's the environmental side. How do we begin to blend those together to see capital as assets in a very different way? And often what I see with my colleagues who come from finance is show me how to use the money, what's the formula? Not looking at the total assets of a community and really understanding what a community needs and how they can work within those assets. Human capital, social capital. And compassion. Empathy. Now, all of these 7 C's, which my Chinese students came up with the C's, are academically grounded. We have case studies that show why good leadership matters. My research is in the area of climate change, systems change, meaning housing, food security, and do we have organizations that are working with capital that exhibit these leadership skills? And those that don't. The deals that I've seen that go wrong are the ones where leaders aren't living these values. So 1,800 interviews in 20 countries with CEOs around the world. I would say 100 actually walk in this place successfully. So, compassion. I'm deliberate and afraid of nothing. That fearlessness, again, is what Carolina exhibits and what all of you exhibit. That's what leadership is. How can you be courageous, build those partnerships, be intentional, and move forward? So one of the things I was asked to do, this is a little blurry shot. Let's see if we've got something else. Is talk about what are models that are working to address the most complex issues. So this issue, what does it represent to you? What does it represent to you? This is Rajasthan, India. What does it represent to you? Anyone? Pardon me? Elegance. A wedding? It's a wedding. So how old is this girl who's getting married? 11. Pardon me? 11. Yes. Yeah. So child brides. There are 250 million child brides that are getting married around the age of 15 or younger in the world. What happens when a girl gets married? She's not educated. Education stops. She's unable to control her life. Her human rights are gone. So, major issue. In Argentina, how many girls are there that are married under 18? Even though the law exists, girls shall not be married before 18. How many? Across the country. Very few. 135,000. Common law marriages, right? So it is not escaping. And as the economy declines, girls begin to lose their rights. As new leadership takes over in terms of populism, girls begin to lose their rights. So how do we address an issue using capital at a cultural, challenging socioeconomic issue, right? This is cultural. So the answer was this case study. UBS Optimus Foundation started the first development impact bond focused on educating girls, and it's literally called Educate Girls, working with an organization called Educate Girls to address this issue, to move as many girls through the educational system and keep them there as possible. So they used what's called a pay-for-success model, which is the nonprofit organization with whom they were working had to keep girls in school. That was their proof of concept. And we will pay you if you keep girls in school. We're not going to give you a grant. We're going to get you an opportunity to prove to us that you will, in fact, keep girls in schools. This is a 3-year pilot. The development impact bonds and social impact bonds are one of the most popular tools that are being used for social change right now. So this, in fact, was one of the issues that was addressed. Educating girls to end child slavery, early marriage, things like that. And it was highly successful, but it took 3 years, 1 year failure, and iteration and honesty, and they were wildly successful. This is now expanded throughout India, run in a partnership with government, nonprofit organizations, and social sectors organizations. So this model is actually being used around the world. Now, there are pitfalls, and one has to approach it honestly, because NGOs, to do this well, have to have colleagues from finance on their team. So that ability to reach what we call lost in translation, people who don't understand social justice issues or change, have to be brought in from finance, and the mind meld has to happen. But this is a model that's being used, and it's being talked about here. And it's been used here, yeah. So Malala and I will talk about that. But this is a model that's being used around the world. Another example, on the continent, in Uganda, there is a social success note that was developed by Rockefeller Foundation. One of the biggest issues facing children who bear the brunt of those issues that we talked about. Women and children bear the heaviest brunt of all those negative issues we talked about that you saw. Women and children bear the brunt. Lack of access to water, clean water, and sanitation, especially around the world, but in this place it was the continent, in Uganda, there was a social success note whereby a social business, not a nonprofit, was given $500,000 to work with multiple schools to ensure that they had clean water in their schools. Capital for good. Capital for good. It was not without its challenges. So going back to that ability to speak the truth about what we're learning is really important, because there were issues with maintenance. Once the systems were installed, who maintained them? Where did the money come to do the installation and maintain it? So these are the kinds of things in Uganda and around Africa and the world that are being used in terms of social success notes. Anyone recognize this? Patagonia, yeah? So what's happening in Patagonia in terms of impact investing and new partnerships? Anyone know? Anyone know? Yes. Yes, regeneration, agriculture and regeneration. Yeah. And this idea, anyone from Nature Conservancy here? So the partnerships that are happening in Patagonia around fruit production and addressing climate change and mitigation. How are we doing on time? Okay? Yeah? I'm making sure you're not yawning too much. I know there might be people falling asleep. So in Argentina, there are, especially in agribusiness, around regeneration, companies that have international companies that are working in Argentina are building partnerships with nonprofit organizations to address issues of how do you keep farmers on the land, how do you keep production up in the face of climate change. So the answer is those solutions are being sought through partnerships with corporations and nonprofit organizations, and where possible, government. So those ability to move and build collaborations across partnerships, across sectors, is going to be even more important. We work with our colleagues in the Amazon rainforest in 11 countries, developing new entrepreneurship opportunities for growers. How many people around the world, what percentage of economic opportunities exist from small businesses? What role does small business have? Question. 70%. 70% of our economies around the world are based on small, medium-sized businesses. And I don't care if you're in Japan, the fourth largest country, economic powerhouse in the world, or Argentina, or Mumbai. Small businesses and entrepreneurs are the success and the lifeblood of our economic opportunities. So how do we begin to aggregate that? What are the challenges that entrepreneurs face? Aggregation around co-ops. How many co-ops can you pull together to actually move products that are regionally, locally based out to the world? So there are a number of colleagues with whom we're working. Amazon Impact Ventures is one of them. 5 students from our social finance class in impact investing came together to start a company. And now they are, in fact, offering loans to entrepreneurs, cooperatives, collectives in 11 different countries. One is based in the UK, one is based in Peru, one is based in Australia, one is based in Dubai. That magic can happen, but it's based on local knowledge and local development of livelihoods. Yeah? We're going to go to Canada and to Indigenous communities. In Canada, there were 6,000 wildfires last year alone. 25,000 Indigenous people had to move from their lands to avoid being destroyed by fire. Climate change is impacting. The reason Canada is on our radar, it's the second largest country in terms of landmass, and they have more Indigenous communities in the Arctic Circle than any other country. So what's happening to Indigenous communities in Canada? They have one of the highest suicide levels tied to climate change and their inability to maintain their culture. This used to be snow and ice, and that's gone. So how are you shifting a culture that's been dependent on fishing and snow and ice for their livelihoods? And that is, again, an issue that colleagues are addressing through a series of equity-based loan programs where they're giving $250 to $3 million for new entrepreneurs throughout these communities to actually reimagine livelihoods. And the equity is coming from a variety of sources, from private finance, from philanthropy, seeding new initiatives to address how real people, create new jobs associated with climate change and poverty. In Japan, 1 in 5 children are poor in Japan. I realize that's not, in Puerto Rico, it's 50%. And in Argentina, your numbers are high. 50% or 1 million women, single moms with children, live in poverty in Japan. So what's happening to create jobs for women and allow children to move out of poverty, even in one of the wealthiest countries in the world? They're using a variety of social bonds, sustainability bonds, that are driven by private finance and businesses' commitment to social change, coupled with NGOs who are on the ground helping them identify partnerships. Now, the difference is government has money to also begin that partnership. Having said that, it's also driven a lot by private sector. And Japan's business has an enormous culture for doing the right thing, yet Japan has one of the highest patriarchy society is a patriarchate and discriminates against women more than majority of other countries. So we're dealing with these issues. One of the big drivers for economic opportunity using capital for good is around blue bonds and green bonds. Blue bond, first blue bond which is economic opportunities around fish and oceans, was 6 trillion yen, driven by private sector, specifically to support new entrepreneurs. Fishers in aquaculture and fishers in wild caught. And 45% of wild caught worldwide are an industry of 45% of women driven, 75% in aquaculture. So I'm done talking at you. And these were illustrations of what the world might offer in terms of ideas. But I was asked the question, again, why and what does Argentina offer? What Argentina offers is the creativity of ideas, a vibrant natural environment where you have resources that can be used as a model for the rest of the world as you think about how you want to develop your economic opportunities. You've got global companies ready to invest and are already investing in Argentina. How do you leverage those resources differently? But I want to go back to those original photos. This is about people to people on the ground making a difference in people's lives and using all the capital that you have at your access, whether it's global resources or local resources, to create new leadership models for impact. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions and say celebration to all of you, to Carolina and her team, and to all of you for the good work that you do. Thank you.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Yayo. Muchas gracias a todos y felicitaciones a Carolina, a Bárbara, a todo el equipo, porque esto marca un gran hito, no solo para Fundación Compromiso, sino para las miles y miles de personas que se benefician de manera directa o indirecta del gran trabajo que hacen hace más de 30 años. Así que un placer haberlos conocido y ser parte de este pedacito del camino de compromiso y brindo por unos 30 años más como mínimo. Así que la idea es poder conversar con Gayle, pero también con ustedes, y yo voy a actuar un poco de traductora para llevar la conversación. La conversación con Gayle es en inglés, las preguntas ustedes las pueden enviar en español, ya empezaron a llegar, me llegan a mí por WhatsApp acá, y vamos haciéndole una conversación. Pero quizás para calentar motores vamos a ir con una pregunta un poco más filosófica y menos enfocada en cuestiones concretas for Gayle. So we'll start a little bit more philosophical and then move on to the more practical questions and great questions that we're getting from the audience here. Y para escuchar en español tienen los aparatitos, así que pueden switcharse ahí. We had several conversations since you arrived to Argentina, and they were great conversations. And to me, one of the biggest questions that underline many of the conversations that we had is, where do you see the spark lighting the fire in a country like Argentina with the amount of opportunities that we have, but also with the amount of issues and challenges that we face? Where do you see that spark lighting a fire?
Right here. Okay. This is on, yeah?
Yes.
This is on. The spark begins here. This is a movement. I've had the fortune to meet with colleagues from finance. I've had the fortune to meet with colleagues from globally who invest right now and have companies in Argentina. It's really understanding the drivers right here in this room and what you're willing to do in terms of building those unique partnerships. So for me, it's a saying, the interest and the desire and the drive is here. How do you begin to make those linkages with colleagues with whom you may not have worked before, but you share a common story and interest in making sure that Argentina is vibrant economically and sends a message to the world about regeneration and commitment to blending livelihoods and environment.
Amazing. Well, I see the fire in youth.
Yeah.
I see that that's why when you see mass demonstrations, what happened in Chile a couple of years ago and what happens in the Arab Spring and many other parts of the world, it's youth who light the fire. It's youth who have the spark. And it's many organizations that help that spark become a fire. And if we can channel all that energy into creating the change that we want to see in the world, I think we've got something. And I think Argentina has plenty of youth. Sadly, a lot of that youth is living under the poverty line. 70% of that youth is under the poverty line. So what do we do with this? And that's where Fundación Compromiso and Potrero Digital play such an important role in igniting that spark, in helping youth become what they want to become in life, not from a subsistence point of view, but from what do you want to see in the world? How do you want to imagine your life? In terms of the questions coming from our nice audience, there's one in terms of scaling impact. You talked a lot about impact, and this conference is all about impact and about really tackling the core of what do we mean by impact. And how does an NGO, how does a non-for-profit in Argentina scale their impact? What kind of players do they need to bring into the conversation in order for them to scale impact? You've talked about partnerships just now.
I think it depends on the community context. So first of all, there's no one solution. But what I usually do is I map out within a community context who are all the players that have knowledge, who have influence. It might be power, it might be money. What does that really look like in my community, and how do I begin to draw on those relationships? So when I think about creating at scale regional or community-based economic development opportunities that are youth-driven, linking those together throughout the country is really important, and that's, again, an opportunity area. But there is no what my students call just show me the numbers and show me the magic. It is really about what's the cultural context of doing this. But I think reaching beyond, mapping out who's in your community, the drivers and the excitement, and thinking about those cross-sector relationships of colleagues with whom you've never worked before, and bringing them to the table to explain your work and to mobilize. So I think about countries in which I work. The strategy has been around community to community and linking those communities with intentionality. So developing relationships with a local bank and nurturing that relationship with literally building community foundations from crowdfunding that can support efforts. Linking those organizations, whether it's Microsoft or Google, with the to address the digital divide. I can't be presumptuous to do that, but that if you think about a node for networking, that's what you're creating. That's how you go to scale based on a regional opportunity or local opportunity and linking those around the country. Now, there's a whole story behind where does the money come from to do that and who supports it.
And that's where the community expands the not-for-profit tent into the investment tent.
That's
we cannot
exactly right.
have one without the other.
Right.
Like Carolina said in the video when you showed 30 years ago, it's not the third sector, it's the first sector. And to me, it's the sector that enables the private sector to flourish.
Right.
If you don't have a vibrant community, no company can flourish. So
Right.
you need to invest in that.
But I think making those relationships with companies and reaching out and understanding how you reach a CEO, how you reach leadership to describe what it is you offer. And that, I think, what makes this work, the celebration in terms of anniversaries, it's making those linkages with colleagues who are from different sectors that embody the change you want and are willing to support you financially and philosophically.
Brilliant. There's one question that came in English, and I think it's a nice segue to also talk maybe about outcome contracts. I don't know if it leads us there, but maybe. In Argentina, as you may know, there are public funds allocated to social welfare programs, like everywhere else in the world, but their management is often criticized for lacking transparency and having poor outcome measurement. In your experience, which is vast, are there any large-scale programs like this globally, like they would combine private sector and public sector, managed in partnership with NGOs or private organizations, and have they been successful?
There are many examples of success, right? And I think that it goes back to, let's take it another way. Government does have a lot of resources available. There's questions of transparency. There's maybe hesitance to be involved. The workaround becomes, what are the other entities? You always need to involve government as a partner, but are there other organizations, businesses with whom you haven't partnered that make the strongest links? So we talk about in Rajasthan, at the time when the Educate Girls Development Bond was created, government was not particularly trustworthy. There were major issues of corruption. So the partners that were first chosen were NGOs and foundations. And then bring in international development finance institutions and improving success and building relationships with government entities that were trusted. So it was a stepping stone of process, right? It was not to acknowledge that, it was not to say government shouldn't be involved, but that's not where it began. It began with trusted partners with resources. In this case, they were external foundations. These are not foundations. Children's Investment Fund Foundation is in the UK, and they were making an investment in India. So they were thinking creatively about those partnerships, recognizing at some point government should be involved, but finding the right path of who to trust and at what level. Was it a state level? Was it a city level? Was it a national level? But it was very with great wisdom and caution, and it was NGO to NGO, building the model, and then seeding it to private sector and seeding it to government.
Great. In terms of one of the instruments that could be used, we have outcome payment contracts. You've described two models, the SYNC and the, well, it's not necessarily an outcome payment contract, but pays by outcome, and social impact bonds and others. What would you say what are the ingredients for success, and specifically for scale?
I'm going to turn it over to you because you were actively involved in developing, a outcome payment process and program here. So I have my own, having done a case analysis and worked on SIBs and DIBs before social impact bonds and pay for success projects. I have my own sense of experience and the challenges that people face. What were your experiences when you worked in Argentina?
To me, you need to approach it with a very long-term view. If you don't have a long-term view, then choose another method. It's cheaper, it's simpler, it's well-oiled, do that. If you have that long-term systemic change view, then this might be a financial instrument for you. The problem is when you're trying to apply that long-term systemic change, strategic view to government officials who have, in the best case scenario, 2 years. Because they're foreign government, 1 is what they've inherited, 2 is when they work, and the last year is how do I get reelected. So that's very short-term mentality. And without that longer-term view, it's difficult. So achieving scale is paramount. If you need to achieve scale, you cannot bank on the government. You will need to have the government sat at the table, but not your main key outcome payer. Second thing is evangelizing the private sector so that they understand that this could be an investment. Of course, initially it's closer to 0 rate of return, so you're going to get your money back, period. But over time, you could become England or you could become the Netherlands, where an outcome payment contract can pay you the same return than a treasury bond for that country. So I think that having the private sector understand that they also need to stay with it for the long run and pool resources together is key. The third element to me is it's the third sector or the social sector, because you are the experts. You are the ones that know how to solve the issue. And you will be invited to think differently, to think strategically, to behave more with the mentality of the private sector, and to pivot and iterate day in, day out, what solution you're providing to that particular population that you're trying to affect change in. And that, to me, was the greatest innovation in the use of outcome contracts. It was like putting Coca-Cola and Pepsi to work together, and by contract tell them you need to share lessons. You need to explain to one another what works, what doesn't, how can you do it better. And that's how we achieved 3 times the success rate that the government was achieving with their government programs, having undergone a massive macroeconomic turmoil, a change of government, and the pandemic that locked kids 1 year in their homes. Yeah. How did we achieve that? Because companies that were working with the individuals, like the potreros of the world, were sharing information, were collaborating, to your points earlier, were really having the courage to think differently and to find a way around it.
So do you think that's a up-and-coming opportunity in Argentina?
I think it is, but I don't think it's going to come from the government. It's not. It's going to come from us. There are many individuals here from representing organizations from the private sector, from the financial sector, and from organizations that are providing these services on the ground. I think employability is one of the biggest opportunities linked to education, and linked to education not for the future, for the now. And I don't think it's with the government, not initially. The government needs to be informed that this is happening and invited. And once they see the results, they'll probably buy in.
I'm gonna ask the question of the audience. I'm moving into dangerous territory. So outcome performance is based, you get paid if you deliver on an outcome, right? Keeping kids in school, keeping girls in school, et cetera. Do you think, which requires a different way of thinking, and the business skills is really important, with Educate Girls in India and every other outcome-based project I've seen, requires staffing of people with finance who come in to do negotiation and to manage money. So those of you from the nonprofit, does it feel comfortable to you to move into a space of moving from a charity model to a performance model where you'll be paid for specific outcomes? Does that feel comfortable to you? Yes or no? Those who feel comfortable experimenting with that model, raise your hand. Fantastic. Those who don't feel comfortable with that, raise your hand. Okay. So that, and is this a horrible thing to do? I'm just ask one quick response from those who raised your hand. Why doesn't it feel comfortable to you? Yeah.
It doesn't feel comfortable because at first you have to deal with money being given to a nonprofit, if it depends on the outcome. What does it happen in the meanwhile? So it's like, well, you have to follow a program or an education or a new program. I'm not talking about existing ones, but you just launch a new program. And what are the resources, or where you get the resources for delivering that program during 3 years or whatever
So it's the ambiguity of the unknown. So let me ask you, for someone who believes that this new innovation is appropriate, why is it exciting to you? Why is it exciting? Anybody?
Cara.
Yeah, Cara, why is it exciting? Yeah, why is it exciting?
Because results, it's the only thing that makes sustainable the work you do. So in the long run, you really have to work, you have to be results oriented. That's what makes sustainable, and that's the purpose of what you do. It's very difficult, and it's very difficult if you don't have money, but if you don't understand that you have to be results oriented, then obviously money won't come. Any other resources won't come.
So I think that piece of being impactful and results-oriented and how you feel about that, yeah? And then we can go on to our other questions. But this is the negotiation that has to take place in order to build a movement to actually spur a new way of thinking, right?
Yeah, the other thing I think that is about who is the one who is going to provide the money. And this means that you can live together with the two models working at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it's a matter of the one who is giving the money. In some cases, you can go for, let's say, the philanthropic model. In some others, for the investing one.
Right.
And you can have a way of living both of them.
Exactly. And it's that adaptability, that comfort level with the ambiguity of reaching out to, is it going to be the opportunity to reach out to the private sector as an investment opportunity? Is it appropriate to reach out to philanthropy? And when is it appropriate to reach out to government? So that is the wisdom of really understanding where the opportunity exists, what are the partnerships that exist, and it's a new way, you act your way into a new way of thinking, yeah? So that's the spark, okay.
And I think that there's a question linked to your point, which is what's the importance of philanthropic funds vis-a-vis impact investment? Do you feel that philanthropic funds are losing turf over impact investors? And do you think that that's dangerous because it's less democratic, that investments are aligned to an investment agenda than to philanthropic agenda?
So the philanthropic agenda, the way impact investing got started was through philanthropy, right? So, and it's got in philanthropy 40, 50 years of experience now, 40 years of experience in blending philanthropic with impact investing. And it goes to your point. It's not either or, it's multiple ways of looking at it. You have a younger generation of philanthropists, ultra-high net worth individuals, and family offices, from my perspective globally, offer the greatest opportunity for flexibility. And the students with whom I work, again, these are senior executives coming from family offices in philanthropy that want to create a new mark, that are business-oriented, entrepreneurs, but want to do something differently. So I'm watching, it's not an either or, it's not black and white, it's understanding and seizing the opportunity. The key is going to be messaging and communication. Is there a united voice in terms of what you're proposing and why, to whom? The money exists, and I recognize Argentina's weakness. Economically, I get it. But I also see Japanese investors in Argentina, I see US investors, I see Belgian investors in Argentina. You need to see the landscape of who you're going to pitch when and why. But the message has to be crystal clear. What does Argentina stand for? Do you stand for scarcity or abundance? And how do you sell this country in a creative way for technology, for the natural resources that you have that are iconic in the world? The only place in the world, Patagonia, right? Agribusiness. How do you position yourself in that global market? I was talking to a colleague, and I don't mean to be pejorative or negative or even weird. It's a political statement now. Are you the Singapore of Latin America? What is it you're selling in terms of your flexibility and innovation around the assets that you have? Do you exploit them and go a traditional route? Or do you reimagine what's possible? That's going to get you more money from Singapore and Hong Kong and the Emirates, right? What is it that you stand for? And I have yet to see that crystal clear messaging. But that's what's exciting, right? The energy opportunities, yeah.
And where do you see those opportunities? in terms of impact investment for Argentina. It's a complex country to attract investment, period. So it'll have to come from within, probably, at the beginning. What's your reading?
I step back and say, in the journeys that, and again, this is not black and white. This is understanding the context. I'm listening to people who have soybean fields and operations here, selling their product globally to make alternatives for hunger and malnutrition. So alternative to peanut butter is soy, right? And moving into a market to address the world's hunger. So I think you cannot assume that it is the initial capital is going to come from Argentina. It will be, in my opinion, it's looking at that global landscape to say who's here. The Dreyfus Group in Nature Conservancy. Dreyfus Group is in the United States, works globally. How do you begin to say, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether it is agribusiness, who's there that can begin with whom you can partner, that are looking at these because they have to, because of global regulation. Climate change is driving companies in very different ways, that they have to be responsible and they're going to be watched. So unless you actually ride the wave of that regulation and that good behavior, you'll miss an opportunity. So I would step back and say, map out who those global companies are that are here and have remained here, even with the trying times, and think about those partnerships and how do you begin to leverage those resources too. So I would not ignore it. I've seen too many investors who want to be here. Anyway, that's it for me.
And linked to that question, there's another one coming from the audience in terms of the return. So investors tend to get demoralized once they pass their first maybe attempt to impact investment, lose a little bit of money, and then they go, nah, you lose money. It's pointless, let's donate.
So again, it depends on the scale that we're talking about. Blue bonds and green bonds and sustainability bonds are not losing money. They're actually being oversubscribed around the world.
I would say gender bonds as well. They are.
Yeah, gender bonds, but gender bonds is still down here.
Yeah.
Blue and green are up here, right? So those are larger scale investors driven by banks, driven by private sector, right? So, and those have been successful around the world. I think impact investing, it depends on what project you're talking about, outcome-based performance. It's riding the wave of that, but I understand the skittishness. People want market rate returns, but I also know that if you blend that capital, if you think about impact economy and what that means in this world, dealing with the issues that we talked about, it is tapping every single entity that has capital and has vision and can provide services in a different way. What is the real impact from each of those sectors, and how do you knit something together? So it's creating that tapestry with intentionality, and that's often beyond the scope of nonprofit organizations. So we're asking you to think about what that tapestry should look like, what the messaging is for Argentina, and who moves it, right? Who takes the tapestry to market?
That's interesting. Yeah. And last question from the audience, related to youth and the role youth should have into defining that strategic vision and that strategic outcome that we want to see with many of it could be impact investment instruments, but also the work that organizations, many of whom are here today, are doing. How do we involve them and get their voice heard?
So the way I approach involving all people of community, youth are critically important because they're the future, they drive the energy, and there needs to be, everybody needs to be at the table. And I think that with wisdom, whether it's elders, whether it's business leaders, it's a community approach to design. And Raven Indigenous Capital, who works around the world, has a community-centered investment practice. That's very different than doing a deal structure in Luxembourg or in Buenos Aires. It's with great intention, involving at a community level the design of an investment. And that buy-in of the community, youth and others, will help design the impacts and will help design the strategy. But it's a participatory process, and in this case, it's based on indigenous philosophy and approach. So taking the time to bring colleagues in, and I, having been through Arab Spring and seeing where Egypt is now, and understanding the youth movement and climate change, my biggest concern is that we put too much pressure on youth, that they will solve our problems. It's a community problem that we all need to address, and bringing in fresh ideas is essential, but not to, I've heard too many times, the youth will solve the problems of the world, and that just isn't going to happen. So it's all of us. And think of it as a kindred to a family meal. You can fight, you can argue, but you're there to celebrate and create that idea. So how we build that community process is really instrumental. And all of the investors and investments that we do in Oxford that we teach is community-centered. It's not from the top down, it's from the bottom up. So.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gayle. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we done?
We're done?
All right.
Yes.
Bueno, muchas
Thank
gracias.
you.
Muchas gracias, Gayle.